Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The SPA in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is Freedom Fighter. Amazing people like you share ways to ensure your freedom physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-given knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and giving a voice of freedom to those who are also looking to have their best life. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Julie Jones, an award-winning international speaker and international best-selling author of the book Stop Waiting, Start Living, and an intuitive coach with the Get Shit Done platform. She is a master connector of people who is passionate about supporting passionate, purpose-driven entrepreneurs to live their best life now without regrets. And as a former police officer and SWAT member, Julie knows there's no promise of tomorrow, and she coaches individuals to face the fear and live in the moment. My police sister, welcome to the show.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for having me. I know it's like so interesting because it seems like I've met a lot of police brothers, but not very many sisters. So I'm super excited to be on the show today.
Oh, so great. Well, it's so funny because I always share with my clients and my listeners about the skills that we learned on the street are so important to not only save our lives there, but they can be the tools to save people's lives in just the entrepreneurial world and their home. I mean, these are life skills that are so important. And I'm sure you've been asked a million times, as I have, is how the heck could you do that job? And, were you afraid? And how do you deal with fear?
It's interesting because I think in the moment when I was back as a law enforcement officer, I don't remember feeling the fear. Like I know I would get the butterflies in my stomach. We were just trained, when we were trained to take action. And I apply a lot of that now in my own life. And when I'm coaching with others, it's like taking steps forward and just taking action. See, it's in the paralysis analysis, if you want to say, like that fear stops you, right? You're like, oh my gosh, like, do I do this? Don't I do this? Sitting on the fence is the most painful place to be. It's like you either do or you don't. Make a decision and run with it. And that's,
Right.
Really what I had to do in law enforcement. Like you made a
Yeah.
decision, you were trained to make decisions, split second decisions. And boy, that has
Right.
really come in handy my entire life.
Absolutely. I mean, we didn't have the luxury to go, well, let me think about this for a little bit and I'll get back to you, right? I mean, you had to make a decision like right now. And that's where that whole preparation, and I totally agree with you with the training. Like when you have a training and just in life, if you've got a plan, like, hey, when certain things come up, you know what your bottom lines are, you know what your boundaries are, and you can make decisions from that place. And of course you can make adjustments, but when you know like what you stand for and what you're about, and you can just step into that and lean into that, I think it becomes less scary. And like you said, we didn't have time to really even actually feel fear, right? It wasn't until sometimes you would get home and you'd be like, wow, okay, that was kind of close. And,
Yeah, it's like the adrenaline dump, right? It's
right.
like in the moment, you're fighting, you're doing whatever. And then like after everything is all said and done, you're like, holy crap, was that just me? Like, did that really just happen at this moment?
Totally.
Because
Yeah.
that was the problem. Like every time you came across a situation, you didn't know how people were going to react. So again, to your point, like you always had to be prepared for anything. Anything and everything could be coming your way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one of the things that we like to share about here on the show is just having like disempowering moments and how you move through those and how you stand in your power. And, I know that we've had a lot of those experiences on the street, but you've had a, near and dear close experience with your husband. And I'd love for you to share that story and how that empowered you, not only for that circumstances, but you had a crossroads in that where you could have made a decision that would maybe have been the safe decision, particularly around your book, and how you really step through that. And I think this is a really important thing, because I think when scary things happen, when life change things happen, that can actually stop people. And you were able to move through it.
Yeah, and sometimes I look back, quite honestly, and I'm like, a part of it seems so surreal. So the story behind it is that we were at a wedding, and my husband had a massive seizure, unexpected seizure. He's never had a seizure before in his life, and he collapsed to the ground, and he literally died. Um, Luckily, at the wedding, there was an off-duty police officer, there was an off-duty paramedic, and they, jumped into the situation right away and resuscitated him. Paramedics were called. They even had to, jumpstart his heart again and everything. So it was a pretty scary moment. And it was interesting from the dynamic of, for me, like having been on the opposite end. Like I had been a police officer, or I had been in that situation, watching them work on somebody. And now here in this case, it was my husband. And the paramedics were so great about telling me everything that was going on, kind of to the point where I was like, okay, enough. Like I get it. I was in law enforcement. So like I understand what is happening. But there was part of me that I think was almost, I don't know what, like distant. Like I was like almost like an out of body experience watching all of this happen.
Right.
And, he ended up spending 5 days in the hospital. He was in a medically induced coma. He was on an intubator. And he's out. And for the people listening, because every time I tell the story, like the look on people's faces, and they think that maybe he didn't make it, and he
Yeah.
did. By the
Yeah.
grace of God, and because of everything that was in place, he is alive. He is recovered. He's on a track to better health. And that happened on November 6th. And on November 17th, I had it planned of last year to release my book. And my book is called Stop Waiting, Start Living. I happen to have a copy of it just handy, right? And so this had been a big goal, a big dream of mine. And I had told my publisher what was happening, and she gave me the option at that moment. She said, okay, well, do you want to move forward with the book release, or do you want to wait? And there were two things that I really knew, like innately. Number one is that my husband has always been my biggest cheerleader and my biggest support. And if I had stopped the project because of everything that was happening, I just knew he would be really upset. Like, he would come out of his coma, anything. He'd be like, what the hell were you thinking? Right. But more importantly, it also gave me something else to be focused in on. Because
Right.
when you're in a tragic situation, like that's all you can seem to focus in on. And then I thought about the title of my book, Stop Waiting,
Right.
Start Living, right? It's like, if I'm going to put a book out there, and I'm such a big one about integrity. Like you got to walk the walk and talk the
Yeah.
talk. And
Right.
so if I was going to put a book out there that said, stop waiting, start living, I had to do the same thing. And I said, nope, we're going forward with putting the book out there. The book was released, and in, one day it went to international bestseller in 3 countries. So I was very clear on that I was going to make it happen.
Right. Well, congratulations on that, for one. And you're right, with a title like that, I mean, I think that's almost like God going like, okay, I'm going to test this theory and put it out there that, and I don't know if you've heard, there's something called the illusion. And I always kind of bring this up. And the illusion is basically whenever you're about to do something really big, something happens. A car breaks down, somebody's in the hospital, like a major thing happens to try and stop you from doing that. And it's just an illusion, right? It's not something that it's meant to see if it's going to stop you. And if you have like the wherewithal, the fortitude, the commitment to actually move through that illusion to accomplish what it is that you're doing. And I think that this is such a perfect example of not only the title of your book, but you being faced with whatever's being faced in front of you and to actually keep doing that. And I love that as one of the actual definitions of fear, right? The FEAR is, right, face everything and rise, right?
Mhm.
That's a higher way to do it. And I think that it's important to envelop those skills. And particularly, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of different challengings for people who have been in a place of fear, been stopped, and all the different things that have been out there publicly. How are you helping not only yourself, but supportive like your clients to kind of rise above the noise and to find like their truth and how it is that they're expressing their freedom in their life?
Well, that's a great question because, like, as I listened to you and I was talking, you were talking about the illusion, because there are so many instances where I believe too, the universe is going to test you to see if this is what you really want. What you say you want, do you really want it? Right. And so all these different things are going to happen. And I think in this era of like with having the pandemic and that we're slowly, coming out of it. And a lot of people lived in fear, and a lot of people didn't. And I chose not to live in fear. And a lot of people that I worked with and my clients, chose the same things. It was a time of people, including myself, starting different businesses. See, I have been a speaker and a coach for 15 years in different capacities. And people have been practically crying, Julie, when are you going to start your own business? And so I did during the pandemic. I said, okay, enough is enough. I actually did my very first workshop when the pandemic was a month old. I had 27 people in attendance online. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm on to something, right? And that's, again, leading by example. I am not going to coach or ask you to do something that I am not willing to do myself, right? Because there is just something around that. But it's the climate. It's like I really am so passionate right now about people realizing that we're dealing with other human beings. We're all in this together having an experience. And it really comes back down to kindness and respect is really where it is. Wherever anybody's at, you have to allow them to be there and they will work through it on their own with the help of other human beings. But going to the you're right or you're wrong or that's good, that's bad, it isn't. It just is what it is right now. And so sometimes for some people, it's taking baby steps. Okay, I can guide you that way as well. But sometimes it's taking total leap of faith. You had talked a little bit before about like with the universe and this idea of the illusion. There's a great book out there called The Big Leap. And if you've ever read the book, it talks about your zone of genius. And a lot of times our subconscious is designed to protect us. So when we're getting to that pinnacle of like success, we can self sabotage, we can get sick. Something's going to come at us that's, again, really going to question us like, is this the direction that we want to do and we want to go? And it's like, you just got to keep moving forward. You just got to
Right.
keep pushing through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where having a consultant or coach comes in because they can hold that bigger picture and that accountability because sometimes left to our own devices, there's, always something that comes up, right? There's never the time. There's like that someday, as soon as, like all those different things that can happen. But when, we know that there is a limited amount of time to really jump in the game and to get things happen. I mean, at any stage of your life, you can do it, but we don't know how long that is for us. And, we want to be able to make the impact that we want to make. And we just don't know what that is actually going to look like. So what do you think as far as, people could hear both of us and they could be like, great, that sounds great. And you say, just do it, right? Just jump into that. That's easy for you because you guys have been police officers and you've been in all these situations. But we also had to take those steps and we had to, grow our courage and our strength and those things along the way. What do you think on that as far as helping people kind of get over that one barrier? And for example, there's a who Mel Robbins is, how she talks about like the 5-second rule. I think this is just such a great, simple tool where it basically says when you decide to do something that you're going to do it within 5 seconds, because if you procrastinate beyond that, there becomes a hesitation and then there becomes, this dull. And it's like, if people says they want to, exercise, right? And they hit the snooze button versus if they within that 5 seconds put their tennis shoes on, right? Then they've got that forward motion. So what do you think is some of those things that people can do to get beyond their head trash, that they have all the best intentions in the world, but that actually doing it aspect holds them back?
Okay, so a couple of things come to mind. And like when you were talking about that, I just listened to Mel Robbins, something by her this morning, right? And I love the 5-second rule because it's all about, taking that action. And interestingly enough, I always remind people, Diane, that my life is not sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns. Like I have to work on it as well too, right?
Yeah.
Because even though I was a former police officer and it takes bravery and it takes courage, right? Years later, I would say about 7 years ago, I was part of a leadership course and you had a contract with the universe. And part of my contract was the word courageously. Now, there were other big words in there like passionate and entrepreneur and, like abundant and all these kinds of things. And they had you underline the one word that you least resonated with. And do you know what that word was? It was courageous.
Courage.
Yeah. After
Yeah.
all that I've done and like still questioning whether or not I had that courage. So it happens to all of us, right?
Yeah.
But now what I do is like, like I almost imagine like, there's this little subconscious voice because it talks to all of us, right? Like if you want to imagine that little devil on your shoulder that's always like yapping in your ear about what you can and can't do, I just tell them to shut the F up. Like, really, like I say, you know what? Like I do. I just like, okay, yeah, thank you for your input, but this is what I'm going to do. Because it's like sometimes, and I know people are probably like, okay, this woman is really crazy. But, like we do have to sometimes talk to ourselves. Like we talk to ourselves to get up the courage, or we talk to ourselves in all kinds of different situations. Why not tell those voices to shut up? And like, sometimes when you tell them to shut up, like you can then follow it up with like a different type of affirmation, right? So for a lot of people, like if I said, I am courageous, there's something to be said about those affirmations. But what ends up happening is if the subconscious really doesn't resonate with courageous and you keep saying, I am courageous, no matter how much you say it to yourself, it just doesn't stick. So I found out like a different technique. I am becoming more and more courageous. I am becoming, or I am allowing more courage into my life. And when you say that, it tells the subconscious you're not quite there yet, but you're becoming there. And that
Right.
really can support people instead of the I've got this. It's like I'm becoming more like this, right? And
Right.
and just go for it.
Yeah, that's so smart because there actually is a lot of scientific research that's come out around that about how the brain reacts. And when you say things like "I'm becoming" and things that are more acceptable to the brain, right? That the brain can kind of wrap and rally behind, it calms it down and it gets you out of that fight or flight. Because if it says, I'm this, and you're not in alignment with that, right? If you're not in alignment with that, then the brain shuts down because it's trying to protect you. And so, having some of these insights about what that looks like, and everyone can test that out for themselves about where you are with something, right? I mean, wouldn't that have been great if on the job we could have gone like, I'm not courageous enough today. I'm not going to, run in while everybody else is running out, kind of thing. You have to sometimes just take that action and trust that you've done everything to support yourself. But I love how in the transition of things to really look at and get honest about where you're at with things. And particularly when people just continually put out there that they have certain goals and they don't take action on them. I'm curious to see like, how do you support people around that in terms of, do they continue moving forward on that, or is it time to reevaluate?
It's time to reevaluate. And really, for most people, it's getting behind the why. Like really, if your why doesn't make you cry, it's not strong enough. So a lot of times people will set goals around things that they really don't feel an attachment to. For the longest time, I would talk about like building a business so that I could free my husband from, his 9 to 5 or how he works so hard. Well, like that was important to me, yet it wasn't like what I really like deep down in my soul that I wanted, right?
Right.
It has to be such a driving force for you that when you don't, question then, what it is, why you're doing it, then those goals kind of seem second nature. And here's the thing, you're always reevaluating, you're always asking questions. And that's really the job of like a coach or like a trusted advisor, a consultant, somebody in your life to give you honest feedback. Because if you're coming to me week after week and like, we've talked about it, you've got this assignment, you're going to do it, and then you come to me and it didn't get done. All right, we got to drill down. Like we got to figure out why it is not happening, because it, to me, it signifies that it's not important to you, is really
Right.
what it comes down to. And, I don't believe in resolutions. And like, I like to call like, like more like targets. Like, what is it that you're going for? There's a very interesting book. Have you read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear?
No.
Oh my gosh, I'm in the midst of reading this. And he really talks about this concept. And it's about habits. And
Okay,
it's
say the title again.
Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's an
Okay.
excellent book. And he really talks about not having goals, having systems. And those
Mm,
systems are really what are going to help you, because sometimes we set a goal, right? And let me just throw out something. If you're making $10,000 a year, I don't know, maybe you're just starting off and you want to make $100,000 a year. Well, people just set this big goal and then they don't have the steps, like how they're going to get there. And he
right.
really talks about like small 1% increments, which don't seem like a lot, but if you're doing them on a daily basis, because habits take a long time to really entrench and ingrain, both good habits and bad habits, like just those little changes can get you to the targets that you want to be.
Right.
Sometimes I don't believe in always being realistic, but yet at the same time, to go from 10,000 to, 100 or $200,000, like, okay, we got to really break down the steps of where it's going to take you to go from, point A to point B.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and I think things like strength finders is helpful too, right? For people to know like, hey, are you in your lane? Are you doing the things that you're here to do? And I think that also comes to that procrastination. Like if people are taking things off their calendar like 3 different times, it's like, no, that's probably not the thing for you because it's not inspiring you enough to actually do it. So I think getting clear on that aspect of it. I mean, there's anytime you're starting a business, there's going to be some aspects that are not your favorite things, right? And until you get to a point where you can delegate those things or you can, reorganize them in a certain way, you got to figure out a way. It's kind of like eating that vegetable, right? Figure out a way that it actually becomes fun for you, or you can attach it to the longer goal about what it looks like in order to get there. Because when you can get clear on that, then it just makes it helpful to be able to do that. And I love that about you saying, hey, you got to look at what's behind that, because a lot of times people will set goals that they're not their goals, right? It could be, something they're hearing in their head from their parents or, their spouse, or what they feel like they should do kind of thing. And I think if anything over the last couple of years, people have had the opportunity and have had the time to really get clear on, is this for me? And what am I to do? And what do I stand for? And how do I want to spend my time? And, these are all great questions to be able to connect with, with your coach and with somebody who sees sees your vision, but the parts that are blind to you, right? And one of my favorite quotes, Les Brown talks about that you can't see the big frame or the big picture, when you're in it, right? When you're in it, you
Right.
can't see the big picture. So I think it's important to be able to check out those blind spots and be able to look at that. So one of the things I'd love to ask my guests, it's just kind of a randomness that I do that I think is just kind of fun, is I think that we live life differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our office. And so what is your favorite room in your home and why?
Oh my gosh. I would have to say it is in my office. Like if you looked around, and I don't have a filter on the back, my background, because like you look in my background and it's a total reflection of who I am, and everything in here inspires me in one way, shape, or form. It's my creative space. It's my dogs are usually hanging out here with me wherever my dogs are, or wherever I am, I should say. My dogs are usually in here. I kicked them out today because I knew I was doing a podcast, and they're notorious for being noisy coworkers, right? But I love the energy that I've created here in my office space. It's me.
I love it. I love it so much. I mean, I think it's so important to have at least a space in your home that is that for you. And so I love sharing and hearing just the different things that it is for people. So I think that is so great. And kind of coming back to our, the connection with just law enforcement, but also just that sense of using your intuition. And I know that you're an intuition coach, as I am, in terms of really trusting yourself on that. And I mean, nothing became more important as a police officer than having to trust your gut and trust, the signals that you got and to be able to act on those things. I'm constantly talking to not only our listeners, but, my clients about not second guessing yourself. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh my gosh, I can tell you every time that I've like questioned something, I'm like, damn it. I knew better. And like it kind of goes to something that you were talking about earlier, is that a lot of the answers and all the wisdom is within us.
Yeah.
And it's like really sitting sometimes in silence and just being. Like we are human
Mhm.
beings, not human doings. And so many
Yeah.
times we're so wrapped up in the have tos that sitting in silence and asking some of these questions and just tuning in to you is going to give you all the answers that you need. But sometimes we're so busy with all the other white noise that we're not really listening. And so, like, my intuition comes in, and maybe does as well, too, is that I just really feel like, not in a bad way, but that I can read people and like know when people are lying to themselves, because
Right.
something just starts to happen. It's like, okay, like you're saying this, the words are coming out of your mouth, but like everything about, either your facial expressions or your body language or something is not in alignment with this. And then that's all I do is I just say, is that really what the case is? Or sometimes it's like these messages just come to me. I'm like, I'll just ask somebody something and then they get really quiet. And then I'm like, I guess I just hit the nail on the head. Right.
Right.
So we all have that within us. And it's just really sometimes honing it and stop
Right.
ignoring it and just really listen. Listen to
Right.
what your gut is telling you.
Yeah, it's great you said that. There's a Bible quote about "Be still and know that I am God," and I just actually put that on one of my walls that I look at all the time because that reminder of being still, right? We can't receive messages, we can't, listen to what's true for us, we can't hear those things if we don't have those silent moments. And I think that that's probably the biggest challenge of our time is to give us that space and not want to fill it in with the next thing that's going on to do that. And I feel like that's something that I'm constantly looking to create that time for myself because there's always something else we could put in there and there's always something else that's going on and, the FOMO and just all the things that show up in there. And I think that has been one of my greatest lessons is to, give myself the gift of that time and to receive those messages because it always comes back tenfold, not only to myself, but to my clients. And, I can see that with yourself as well.
Mhm. Well, and one of the things is like, how do you talk to yourself as well? So for years, my husband referred to me as his squirrel, right? Because it was like shiny object syndrome. Like, like you talked about, like the fear of missing out. And my dad used to say that I could pack, 20 pounds of crap in a 10-pound bag, right? Like, I mean, that was how I lived my life.
Right.
And after a while, like when you start subscribing to that squirrel mentality, it was me shifting and me saying, no,
Mm.
that's not me. Like I am becoming more focused. I can be just in the quiet. I don't run around anymore. If anything, the pandemic showed me how much more I can streamline and be much more effective rather
Right.
than running around like a chicken with my head cut off. There's
Agreed.
a difference between being woo busy, as I call it, like, like run, 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 or being productive and
Yeah.
really knowing what the end result. You don't have to be working 24/7. Like, I
Right.
mean, I know as entrepreneurs, we get so passionate about what we're doing. There's still a life to live, right? Like
Right.
we weren't put on this earth to do, 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 do. It's
Mm.
like, take the time to smell the roses, like be outside and enjoy the beauty. And again, there's so many things for us to take advantage of if we just
Right.
stop doing all the time.
Well, and I think that, if we can do that, anyone can, because I think some of that is residual from the job. I mean, if you are in charge of like 911 calls and you are just going from like one little chaos moment to the next, you kind of get caught up in that. And what we do in our work becomes a reflection of how we live our life. And so it's important. And I'm sure people feel this in whatever work that they do, even if they're home with their children or they're out being an entrepreneur or they're working for someone, there is always that kind of pressure, right, to, get things done and complete and all that stuff. And I love the distinction that you're making in terms of being productive. And a lot of times the most productive thing you can do is do nothing, right? And to give yourself that space and then actually step forward with more confidence and take those courageous steps because of the right steps. And you've given yourself that time to do that. So I so appreciate that.
Yeah, one of my favorite times, my favorite contemplating times, and maybe you'll agree, is when I get in the shower, right? Because you don't think about taking a
Yes.
shower. And like all these amazing ideas start to come to me. I'm like, ooh, that's a good idea. And again, it's just in the being, just being like all these brilliance. Like when you say about do nothing, Brene Brown talks about that. It's like in the doing nothingness that all this creativity starts to come to you because you don't have your brain on, 24/7.
Right. Absolutely. No, I totally agree because it just allows you to have those inspirations that come. So I think that is so, so great. And I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they do that?
Best way is through my website, juliejones.biz, B-I-Z. I like to say I'm the one and only. However, I know there's a lot of Julie Jones out there. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm termed as the adventures of Julie Jones because I live this adventurous lifestyle and I inspire others too as well. So there's multiple ways that you can find me. Just track me down, cyberstalk me.
I love it. So good. Well, we'll put those links in the show notes as well, so people will be able to do that. And I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom. And I'd like to leave the guests with our theme this season is freedom fighters. So, in what way are you being a freedom fighter today?
You know what? It's the inspiration. It's like really speaking what's on my heart and living my best life. Like when I live my best life and inspire others to do the same, that uh, there's no better way to show people that they can have the life that they desire. It's like start creating a life that you design versus by default. And so like let's link arms. Let's link arms. Everybody's welcome in my tribe and let's find ways for you to be free as well.
Absolutely. Designing your life, that is definitely a great track to freedom. So thank you again for all you do, and thank you for your service, and I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show today. It's been an honor.
You got it. And for our listeners out there, thank you for being here with us. And until we connect again, live your SWAT life. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.